Okay, welcome to Afternoon Art Club. I'm Miss Kim. This is Afternoon Art Club for 1st through 3rd graders. Right now I have everybody muted, and the reason I have you muted is that our recording records anybody who is talking. And so if you start talking, it will record your name and your face, and I do not want that. We want to make sure that your face and your name are completely private and nobody can see anything but me in the recording. And so we keep you muted while we're recording. There will be an opportunity at the end of class today for me to stop the recording, and I'll unmute everybody and you'll be given a chance to talk. If you have a question or you just want to say hi, we can do that at the very end. Now, today, I'm going to be talking about a few things with you, and you might have a question while I'm talking. So let me tell you what to do if you have a question while I'm talking. Down at the very bottom of your screen, of your, the bottom of your Zoom window, right in the middle, you will see a little box that looks like a little text bubble, and it says chat underneath it. If you click that chat button, then you will open up a little chat window on the side. I've just opened up my chat window and I'm going to say hi to everyone. So what I want you to do, yep, I see some highs coming. I'd like for you to click on that little chat bubble at the bottom and just say hi to me. That way I know that you know where the chat bubble is. And if you have a question, you know how to say, to ask either an adult to help you type your question, or you have a way to ask me. All right. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch of highs. That's very good. So it looks like we know where the chat icon is. Perfect. All right, so while you're muted, anytime I'm talking, if you have a question, please just type it in the chat box, or if you have a grown-up nearby and you need a little help, then they can help you type it into the chat box. That'll make sure that your names and your faces are never on our video recording, and that's very, very important to us. All right, the other thing I want to tell you about is all the way at the bottom where that chat icon is. If you go all the way to the left, you're going to see a little microphone. Your little microphone probably has a red line through it right now because you're muted. But once I tell the computer that you can unmute, if you want to talk, you just click on that little microphone and it'll open up your microphone so that you can talk to me. So right now I have everyone muted. It won't work right now, but at the end of class today, you'll be able to do that. And I'll remind you how to do it at the end as well. So those are just a few logistical things that'll help us operate during Afternoon Art Club. If you have any questions, always during our class, please just throw them in the chat box. Okay, the other thing I want to go over before we get started, and we won't do this every week, just this week. The other thing I want to go over it with you are our rules for Afternoon Art Club. So today, I'm going to be teaching you a little bit about clay. We're going to be talking about clay. We're going to be beginning a clay project that we're going to do together over the next few weeks. You guys are going to be doing that with me. But there will be time in some of our sessions where you're going to be able to show your artwork to the other boys and girls that are in our class, and where they can tell you, they will give you some feedback on your artwork. So they'll tell you what they love about the artwork that you've created. They might give you some suggestions on some additional things you could do to your artwork. So we have some rules for that. The first rule is to be kind. We want to make sure that everybody enjoys art making, and part of that is making sure that we're being nice to each other. So please make sure that all the words you use during Afternoon Art Club are kind words. And our second rule is to be respectful. I'm going to be talking a lot, and if you have a question, again, put it in the chat box. And if I don't anticipate anybody being disrespectful, but please, please try to be kind and respectful at all times. Okay, guys? That's super easy, I hope, especially in this online format. So we are now ready to get started. Remember, if you have questions, put them in the chat box. Don't forget, I'm going to repeat that a lot during our class, so don't forget that that's a thing. All right, so now we're ready to get started, and I am going to share my screen with you. I am going to share a little presentation, a little PowerPoint presentation with you. Hold on one second, I'm going to turn that off. All right, now let me pull up my PowerPoint presentation to share with you, and let's talk about what we're going to be making this month. Let's see. All right. Okay, now I am sharing my screen. So you should see on your screen that it says clay fish. We're going to be making some little clay fish sculptures together. It's going to be so fun. I'm going to be showing you all the steps to making your clay fish. And I think that if you have never worked with clay before, you're really going to enjoy it. Before I start, I'm going to pull up my chat box so I can see everyone. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to back up. We are going to be making clay fish together, boys and girls. We're going to be using some clay. The clay that was in your art kit, if you picked up a kit from us, it's just a little plastic baggie with a hunk of red clay in it. Now, if you got clay on your own, if you supplied your own supplies and you have clay on your own, any type of air dry clay will work for this project. You don't need to worry about it looking like my clay. It doesn't have to be red clay. If you have a white clay or sort of a yellowish clay base or any type of air dry clay that you have gotten will be perfectly fine for this project. If you have a question about clay or you can't find some and you need some, then please reach out to me because I can package up just the clay for you if that's what you need. So I'm happy to do that for you as well. All right, guys, so things we're going to need today. We're going to be using clay, and we're going to be using a process called pinch pot making. We're going to be making a pinch pot to start with, and then turning our pinch pot into a fun textured fish. Okay, so let's get started talking about just a few things before we make with clay ourselves. I want you to look at a few examples and talk to you about some important things that I want you to know about clay. So first of all, pinch pots, you can see a little pinch pot right here on your screen. This one's made out of white clay. Pinch pots are usually kind of small, and pinch pots have been made by people and cultures all over the world for thousands and thousands of years. There's some of the oldest clay artifacts we have are pinch pots that have been made by people and cultures all over the world, not just in America, but all over the world. Now, I'm going to teach you a big word today. Today, this is our vocabulary word for the day. These pinch pots are mostly what we call utilitarian. Now, I know I can't hear you right now, but I want you to say that word, utilitarian. It's a long word. I see your voices, your lips moving, so that's great. Utilitarian. Now, that is a long word, but what it means is that these pots were useful. They were made to use for a purpose or for a reason. They weren't necessarily made to be beautiful or decorative, but to be useful. Now, I want you to think for just a minute about something that you have at your house that's really useful. Maybe think about something that's clay, like the dishes in your house. Does anybody have a cup at their house? This is my coffee cup. It's really big. It's definitely utilitarian because I use it every single day. It's meant to be used. And it was designed to be used. So maybe think about if you ate cereal this morning, maybe you ate cereal out of a bowl, or maybe you ate a sandwich at lunch off of a plate. Those things can be beautiful, but more importantly, they have to be functional. They have to be usable. If, for example, you were to pick up your cereal bowl and it had a lot of really beautiful holes in it, it probably wouldn't work very well as a cereal bowl, would it? Because of all the holes. So It's really important when we are talking about utilitarian objects that they be useful. So most pinch pots that were made thousands of years ago were not necessarily made to be beautiful. They were meant to be utilitarian or useful. So maybe as a bowl or a cup or a pot to cook in, but not necessarily as something beautiful to put on a shelf. All right, now let's take a look at something that was meant to be kind of beautiful and maybe also utilitarian. This pot was made by a member of the Catawba Native American tribe. I want you to look closely at this pot. This is one of my favorite objects that we have here at the museum. We have this pot right here at the Florence County Museum. It's one of my favorite objects that we have. It's a clay pot. It could be useful. Take a look at it. Maybe it could hold water if I needed to go down to the river and scoop up some water to drink. It could be useful for that, but it might not, it doesn't have to necessarily be used. This pot is actually pretty decorative. So let's take a look at what's on it. I want you to look at this object that's attached to the pot right here. Can you tell what that is? It's a snake. It's a black snake. You might have read over here where it says a black snake pot. But this is a Catawba pot and it's called a black snake pot. Now, black snake pots were very, very important symbols to the Catawba Native Americans. Black snake pots or black snakes were symbols of leadership and respect amongst tribe members. So for you to be given a black snake pot would mean that the people in your tribe respected you and saw you as a leader in the tribe. Now, let's take a closer look at this pot. And I want you just to think about this. I know I can't hear your answers right now, but I want you to think about this a minute because we're going to be doing some of these same things. So I want you to look and see, how do you think that the Catawba were able to attach this snake to the pot? How could they attach it so that it didn't fall off? Attaching pieces of clay together is actually a little bit trickier than just mushing them together because as the clay dries, it wants to shrink a little bit. And when the clay shrinks, those pieces just want to fall right off. Hold on 1 second. Let me make sure. One second for me. I'm sorry. We had somebody coming in. I wanted to make sure I had him. All right. Okay. So I'm sorry about that. I was trying to let somebody into our meeting. Okay. So this, the way that the clay is attached, let's go back to how the clay is attached. The way that the clay is attached is a special way. So we're going to talk about how we attach the clay so that it will not fall off of our clay pot as it dries. Okay, so let's go forward. Also, we're going to talk about the color on this pot a little bit later. Oops. Okay, so we're going to be talking, you don't have to, this is all written down in a lot of words, but we're going to be actually doing this. I just kind of like to write it down so that if you're looking back at this video later, that you'll have these instructions written down for you. So when we attach two pieces of clay, and I hope that you are able to see me, hopefully in the corner of your screen. When you attach two pieces of clay together, we can't just mush them together. We have to do something to make them really stick together like this. So the first thing that we're going to do is score the clay. Scoring the clay really just means making some scratches in the clay. If we make scratches in the clay and then we push the two pieces of clay together, it's kind of like if your fingers were intertwined. It really gives it something to grip onto so that those pieces of clay don't come apart. So the first step is scoring. Now, like I said, we're going to be practicing this next week, but I do want to go over it with you today. The second step is to slip, and that just means to make some clay glue. Now, clay glue is just made with water. So if you have water, then you can make, well, if you have water and clay, then you can make clay glue. And we're going to practice that as well. And then the last step is to take those two pieces and really push them together well to make sure that your clay pieces don't come apart. Now, we're going to come back to this question, but this is a question that I want you guys to think about throughout the next week, because we're going to start in just a few minutes working with clay. And I want you to think about how working with clay is different than you thought it would be. You guys might have used Play-Doh before. You may have used clay before, but I want you to think about how clay is different than what you thought it would be like throughout this week. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and come back to my face. You can see me again. I can see your faces. All right. And now I am going to share my desktop so that you can see exactly what is on my desktop. Hopefully it's working well today. Let's see if I can get this up. Here we go. All right, it's a little bit funny. Hold on just a second. Let me get it working. I'm gonna stop and try that again. Sometimes I have to try twice for it to work properly. All right. There's that and this. I'm hoping this will work. Okay, perfect. Okay, guys, I'm gonna just zoom in a little bit. Oops. Actually, I'm gonna go back. Give me just a second to get us situated here. I'm gonna push all this right there. We go. And lock the focus so that it's not so crazy. All right, guys, so you should be able to see my face up in the corner, but you should also be able to see my desktop that I'm working on. Now, we are going to start out today by making a pinch pot. Now, if you're wearing long sleeves like me, you might want to pull your sleeves up because clay can get a little bit messy. And if you have your clay already, if you picked it up from us at the museum or you bought it separately and you have it already, you can work along with me. If you don't have your clay yet, if you have not picked it up yet, if it's still here and you haven't made it by the museum to get it, or you haven't gotten to the store to get it, then you can just follow along with this and you can watch the video starting tomorrow, because we do post this video. Now this is my clump of clay, and I'm going to start by just dividing it in half, and I really just kind of twisted it to divide it in half. And I'm going to put one half of it back in the bag. Okay, so I'm going to start just like that. So I've got one half of my clay in the bag and the other half of clay right here in my hands. And the first thing I want to do is start to just work it in my hands a little bit. See if you can squish the clay around in your hands a little bit. What does that clay feel like? It might feel harder than you thought it would feel. Clay can sometimes be really, really hard. I'm going to make sure that my chat box is up. Sorry, it went away when I shared my screen. All right. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of play with this a little bit. I can roll it. Now, I do have a piece of paper down on my table surface. That's a good idea to work on some paper. It can be any kind of paper, old newspaper. This is just some scrap paper that I had lying around. And I do like to put that down on my table surface just to protect it a little bit. So I'm just kind of rolling this clay around. Just rolling it around, getting a feel for it. The first time I ever used clay, I thought it was way colder than I thought it was going to be. It felt kind of cold, and it's a lot harder than Play-Doh. It's harder to squish, isn't it? All right, so let's go ahead and roll our clay into a ball. Everybody go ahead and roll your clay into a ball. You can use your table surface, and I'm just kind of rolling my hand right on top of the clay. Look, my hands are very messy because of this clay, but don't worry, it'll wash right off. Even if you get it on your clothes, it'll wash right out. Clay is really just a kind of mud. It's just a special kind of dirt. So we're just gonna roll our clay on our paper. Just give it a roll, and then maybe roll it in your hands to get it in a nice smooth ball. So go ahead and roll your clay into a nice smooth ball. You can kind of pound it with your hand. If you've got some areas that are hard to roll, give it a little bit of a pound. That'll help. There we go. So I'm just gonna roll my clay into a ball, and I'm gonna set it down on my table surface. Now you'll notice there's still some little wrinkles in the clay. That's totally fine, it doesn't matter. All right, and so I've got my ball of clay right there. Now we are getting ready to start turning our ball of clay into a pinch pot. I see some people holding up their balls of clay. Good job. You can just set it right down on your table once you've got it into a ball. And my hands aren't on it right now. I'm just going to talk to you for just a second about what we're getting ready to do. So we're getting ready to turn our ball of clay into a pinch pot. And we're going to need one very important tool to do that. And I bet that you all have it ready. So we're going to need a thumb. Everybody have a thumb? All right. I see some thumbs up. Very good. You don't need both thumbs. You only need one. We're going to use one thumb to start out our pinch pot. Just one. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I've got my thumb. You can see right here. I'm using my right hand to do that. I'm right-handed, so I'm using my right thumb. And I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to push it down into my ball of clay. So I'm going to leave the ball of clay right on the table. Watch me first before you do it. I'm going to get my thumb and I'm going to push it down into the clay. You kind of have to push hard, but I don't want to push all the way through the bottom. You don't see my thumb coming out the bottom, right? My thumb made a little hole in the ball of clay, but it did not go all the way through. You see that? So there's my clay, my thumb in the clay. It made a hole, but it did not poke a hole in the bottom. So go ahead and do that. Go ahead and get your thumb pressed into the clay. Don't forget, if you have questions, just throw them in the chat box. You're going to go ahead and use your thumb to push a hole down into the clay, just like that. You're just going to push the hole down into the clay, but don't let the hole poke through the bottom. If the hole does poke through the bottom, you just need to roll it back up into a ball again. Just roll it back up into a ball again and start over if it pokes all the way through. All right, guys. So now we have a ball of clay with a hole in the middle. That's the beginning of a pinch pot. Now, I want to show you what tools we need next. And I bet you have those as well. So we're going to need 2 fingers and a thumb. And I want you to make them quack like a duck. Just like that. Quack, quack, quack. Can you do it? There you go. Make your 2 fingers and your thumb kind of quack like a duck. That is the motion that you want to use when you're pinching your clay. Let me show you what not to do. Watch me. Do not pinch like this. When we think about pinching, sometimes we think about this movement, right? Where you take your finger and your thumb and you pinch. I'm sure you've never pinched your brother or sister before like that. So what you're going to do is you're going to use your 2 fingers and your thumb, and you're just going to kind of make them quack like a duck. That is the pinching motion we're going to use. Okay? So watch me here. Watch me before you do it. I'm going to start opening up the hole in the middle of my pinch pot, by sticking my thumb down in the hole and then use that kind of quacking motion, like you're quacking like a duck. And I'm turning, do you see how I'm turning my clay pot? I'm turning my clay pot around, I'm pinching and then turning it, pinching it, turning it, pinching it, turning it, and I'm just doing that slowly. You don't have to go fast, and you'll notice I'm not pinching like this, not at all, only using that little quacking motion. And as I'm doing this, I can kind of feel where some areas of the pot are thicker than others, where I've got some thick areas and some thin areas. I can kind of feel that. And I'm just pinching all the way around, trying to smooth it out. We want it to be nice and smooth. If 2 fingers are too hard, you could even use more fingers. You could use all your fingers like this, if that helps you. But you want to feel like, it feels to me like there's a lot of thickness right here. It's really thick. So I'm just going to push that a little bit. I'm not pinching like this. I'm just pressing with my fingers, and my thumb is on the inside. You can see, I'll turn it like this so you can see what I'm doing on the inside. My thumb stays on the inside all the time. I'm turning the pot around, turning and pinching, okay? And you can see how thick my pot still is. It's not really thin. It's not really thin, and I don't want to pinch it really thin because I want this to stay nice and strong. So today, our goal is to get a really good pinch pot started. And next week, when we meet back together, we're going to take our pinch pots and we're going to turn them into fish sculptures, which is going to be so much fun. But first today, we just want to make sure we start out with a really good pinch pot. So just kind of pinch it around. Try to make sure the thickness is even all the way around. If it's starting to get too flat, you can kind of push it down. You can sort of see this a little bit. You can push down with your thumb just a little and kind of make it go back into a bowl shape, or you can use your hands like this and sort of squish it together just a little bit to bring those sides in. But one thing you never want to do is pinch like this because it'll get too thin too quickly that way. All right. Now, there's another step we're going to do once you're finished with your pinch pot. And if you're not finished with your pinch pot right now, then you keep on pinching and just kind of watch me while I'm talking, because I don't want you to go on to this next step until you're really happy with your pinch pot and it's pretty even all the way around. You don't have some really thin or thick areas. You've really worked to make it even and you're happy with the shape. Now, once you get something kind of like this, you'll notice I've got lots of crackly bits up here, and we're going to smooth those out, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. But first, I want to go back to what we talked about in the beginning of our lesson when we learned that vocabulary word. I hope you remember what it was. That vocabulary word was utilitarian. And remember, I told you that utilitarian means it's made to be useful. It's made to be used and functional. So I want you to think about the pinch pot that you have. If we wanted this to be something that's utilitarian, what could we use it for? If we didn't have any cups at home, could we use this to drink out of? Maybe. Not at this point, because the water would get pretty dirty, right? But the form is, the shape of it would be great for something like drinking some water. You could eat a tiny bowl of cereal out of this, couldn't you? It'd be really small. Or a little tiny bowl of ice cream. But a form like this, a pinch pot like this, to the Native Americans, for example, would have been used for something functional. So maybe it would have been used to gather leaves of some type to make tea with, or maybe it would have been used to scoop water up from the river, or maybe it would have been used to hold something that was precious to them. So it would have been utilitarian or functional. Now, after you have your pinch pot, I still see some people working on their pinch pots, and if you're still working on it, that's just fine. We are going to smooth it out a little bit, and let me show you what you're going to need for that. You might want to use, and you don't have to use this, and if you do use it, it needs to be used sparingly, and I'll talk to you about that. This is just a tiny little bit of water in a cup. Now, before I use this water and before you use any water, I want to show you something. I've got all these crackly parts on my pot, and I can gently just kind of slide my finger over those and start smoothing it out. Smooth out those crackly parts with my finger. You see? I don't have to put any water on the pot to smooth out most of these little cracks. And let me tell you why that's important. If you put too much water on your clay, it's going to turn into a mud puddle. Because clay is just kind of like a sticky mud. And think about a mud puddle outside. The more water there is in it, the more squishy and squashy it is. And the less water there is, the more solid it is. So, if you can just smooth it out with your finger, that's really better. Now, you might get to a spot that's pretty stubborn. This part right here happens to be pretty stubborn. I'm rubbing over it and rubbing over it, but it's not wanting to smooth out. So let me show you how to take care of that. You're going to use one finger. Do you see this? See my finger? One finger. And I'm going to dip it in the water one time. I'm not dipping my whole hand in the water, and I'm not pouring the water on top or dipping my finger in 15 times. I'm dipping my one finger in the water one time, and I'm going to actually kind of shake off some of the water. And then I'm going to take my finger that's got a little water on it, and I'm going to rub it on to the surface of the clay. And look at that. It smooths it out. Now, I want to keep rubbing until it's not shiny anymore. You can see how that water has soaked into the clay. It's not shiny anymore. If it's still shiny, then you need to keep rubbing. Okay? So that smoothed that out nicely. And then I can just move on to my next section. If this part's being a little stubborn, I take one finger, I dip it in the water one time, and I'm going to shake off a little, and then just rub my finger over it to smooth it out a little. Just like that. Remember, we don't want to put a lot of water on our clay. We just want a nice smooth surface to work with. And you'll probably also notice that where you put that water, the clay is a little bit stickier than it was before. So you want to go ahead and smooth out. That's nice and smooth. You want to smooth out your whole entire clay pot so that it's ready for the sculpture we're going to create next time. Okay? So you just want to go ahead and do that. Keep just rubbing it. All right. Now, the last part that you want to smooth out, the last part you want to work on here is the rim around the edge there. And you want to do the same thing. Just kind of smooth it out so it's nice and smooth. You do not want to have it all crackly on the rim. So we're just going to kind of smooth it out. I'm just using my finger. I'm not pinching. I'm still not pinching. Anybody notice that? No pinching movements. I'm just smoothing with my finger to smooth out the clay. Okay. All right. And that's not 100% perfect, but I think it looks pretty good. I think that is a nice pinch pot that I've made. It's nice and round in the center. I've made it nice and round in the center and nice and round on the underside. It sits on the table. Now, let me give you one little hint. If your pinch pot is leaning over to one side like that, then sit it up straight and give it a couple of gentle taps on the table, just like this. You can go tap, 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 just gently, and that'll kind of flatten the bottom so that it sits nice and level. So if it's a little wobbly and it's not sitting sturdy, then you just lift it and gently give it a tap, tap, tap on the table, just a gentle one. And that'll flatten that bottom. You can even see that it flattened the bottom there. Okay. All right, guys. So today we have started out making a pinch pot. Next class in 2 weeks, when we come back together, we are going to take this pinch pot and turn it into a really amazing fish sculpture. It's hard to imagine how that's going to happen, but I promise you it's going to happen. Now, before you are finished today, before we finish up, I need to tell you how to take care of this clay pot, because we do not want this to dry until after we turn it into a fish sculpture. So here's what you need to do. Let me grab that material. Okay. Right here in my hand, I have a paper towel that I have dampened, and then I ran it under some water, and then I squeezed it out really good over the sink. It's just a paper towel. And I'm going to take my clay pot and I'm going to wrap it up in that damp paper towel. Now, this is after I'm done with it. So if you're still working, that's just fine. You can wrap it up in that damp paper towel. And then you can either put this in a Ziploc baggie. You might have room for it in this one. If not, you can grab a different Ziploc baggie. But I'm also going to show you something else you can do. You could also wrap it up in plastic wrap. It does kind of fit inside here. You just have to be gentle not to squish it if you're putting it in this same one. Try to get some of the air out of there. All right, so you could leave it just like that in your plastic baggie. Make sure you seal it up real good because you don't want any air getting in there. And that paper towel is going to help keep it nice and damp for when we're ready to use it in 2 weeks. Now, if you don't want to put it in your Ziploc baggie, or you can't get yours to fit because maybe your pot is shaped a little bit differently than mine, then you can also use just some plastic wrap that you might have at home, or let me get this, or just an old grocery bag. So this is just like a plastic grocery bag. I'm going to take it. I'm going to put this down in the grocery bag, and I'm just going to kind of wrap it over a bunch of times. Just wrap the whole thing over a bunch of times, just like that. And that'll stay nice and moist for next time we meet, okay? So your goal for next time, I'm going to actually stop sharing my desktop so you can see my face. Okay, so your goal for next time is make sure you've completed your your pinch pot. Make sure you've made your pinch pot, finish that up. Then I want you to remember that question I asked in our presentation at the beginning. At the very end of the presentation, I asked a question, and that was, how is working with clay different than you thought it would be? I want you to think about that over the next couple of weeks. Think about how it felt. Did it feel differently than you thought it would? Or was it squishier or harder or colder or warmer? Was it easier to work with than you thought, or was it more difficult? I just want you to think about how working with clay is maybe different than what you thought it would be like. All right, so boys and girls, I am going to go ahead and stop the recording here in just a moment. And if you have any questions, I'm going to give you the opportunity to unmute yourself. Just remember, please, to have your clay pot, your pinch pot, all the way finished for next time. We are going to be using the rest of this clay for our sculpture. So don't use this clay for something else. We're still going to need it for our sculpture. All right, guys? Okay, let me stop the recording and then I'll make it so you can unmute if you would like. Thank you.